Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Suzanne Harris, and on this podcast, I talk to the authors about themselves, their books, and their ideas, but I also like to talk to them about beginnings. Joining me today is John Wheeler, and he's here to talk about his book, Prayer is a Journey. Now, John is an author, a lawyer, a marriage counselor, and a modern mystic. He's made a lifetime of studying God through intense prayer and purgation. He's also studied the writings of the Spanish mystics, and he's a fascinating individual, and I can't wait for you to hear him and to talk about this wonderful book. John, thank you so much for joining me on Books on Air. It's a pleasure to have you as my guest. Welcome.
Pleasure's all mine, Susan.
You know, I said I like to talk about beginnings, and I'm always curious. Your background is amazing. You have done so many things, and you have, I was just astonished when you and I started talking before we started recording at all the different things that you've done. And I'm curious about writing. Authors decide to write books for a lot of different reasons. Some of them because as a child they began to read and they decided, I think I'd like to do this for a living. Others, there was something that they wrote in college or something that they wrote that a teacher read and they were encouraged, and so they became a writer. Sometimes there's a seminal event that occurs for a person, whether it's positive or negative, and that seminal event causes them to decide that they need to share whatever that is with the world. How did you start writing in the first place, and why?
I was told to by God. All that knowledge that I've put in the book I acquired over years, and I thought I'd be going to the grave and taking it to my grave. And I've been writing that over 20-odd years because I start and stop and come back in 2 years' time. And that's what happened. I was ordered from above. I went to a seminar put on by the local council here, and they had the top authors in the world, also in the district, come to speak to authors. After listening to them, I decided I shouldn't be an author because lawyers are into flowery language, and they said that's an absolute no-no. So anyway, I'm writing another book on my life experiences, which is something else as well. But this is my one and only book on religion. I have no more to say than the people can understand these things if they want to. I'll tell them about my journey of prayer, and in the other book, my life story, you can get the experiences that I've had. I've had some experiences with God, helping me in different things. But that's all. I was ordered to do it, for myself. I couldn't care less. But
I really like your writing style. I found it to be approachable. I found it to be conversational, almost as if I were sitting with you, listening to you talk in the room. I thought that I really enjoyed the way that you say things, and the logical approach and the personal approach that you take to the book. I want to talk about the book cover. When I first looked at the book cover, I thought, what's this? Tell our listeners what's on the cover of the book.
What's on the cover is a moon rock. And the significance of that is that rock was discovered by NASA. It had been on the moon for 4.5 billion years, but didn't move. And the significance is, have a look at the rock, think about 4.5 billion years, and then think about 4.5 billion years, and then think about eternity, because that's where you're going to finish. You need to make decisions now because eternity doesn't end. 4.5 billion times 4.5 billion is nothing compared to eternity. That's what that's all about.
I love that. And you use that in the introduction. That's one of the first things when I opened the book. I saw the picture of the moon rock again, and I thought, okay, he's going to tell me what this is. And when I started to read that, I thought, wow, I love that.
That's right.
Yeah, as an opener. I thought that was just terrific. Why do you say that Go ahead.
No, I get the help from above.
Well, that was a stroke of genius right there. I loved it. Why do you call prayer a journey?
That's a strange thing. When you write a book, you've got to think of a name. I've given that book to a lot of people, and everyone's got a different name. And what happened with me, I made that Casillo, which is the renewal thing in the church. And after about 2 weeks, I started praying. And nothing happened for about 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, I took off. And it was like a magic carpet ride. And it went on for years and years and years. And it was a journey. It was a journey sitting on a magic carpet, and I was being driven along. So that's why it's a journey. And just the other day, I was at a meeting with the local archbishop, and he was saying that the current pope had said that the church is going through a journey, the Catholic Church is going through a journey, and we need to get lay people to help us on the journey. And I thought to myself, maybe that's why I call the book Prayers a Journey. But that's all. It's just a journey that I was on, where I started as a tyro, and where I finished up as a mystic. So, and it's all, I tell the people how to do it. There's no reason why anyone that's listening cannot do it. But you have to pray, If you don't pray, nothing happens. That's all. That's all. And I've given all the things I did, all the things that I did to pray. Religious things I was in, religious meetings. I'm the foundation president of the Big Brothers Big Sisters in Australia, and I ran that for about 15 years. So I've done a lot of other things as well. Anyway, that's all. That's where it comes from. It's a journey. It was like getting on Aladdin's magic carpet. That's all.
As I looked through the table of contents, there's a short excerpt on Amazon that people can read. It's the introduction and the explanation of the book, Prayer is a Journey. But as I looked through the table of contents, I found some of the chapters intriguing, and I was curious about them. And one that jumped out was some myths that I was taught. What did you include in that chapter?
Well, as I said, when I was 10 years of age, and they were telling me about all the Old Testament parables, I said, these are not correct. And I've included in there all the things, the myths that I've uncovered, such as I started, Adam and Eve never existed. Adam is the first man, and Eve is the first woman in a person's soul, because we are made in the likeness and image of God. We look like God and don't look like a Martian. And we're made in his image. In other words, we have his spirit. So that's where we all start. And then we all find a way to sin, and we lose that. The Garden of Eden is a little bit more complicated. That's what I call the stage. That's the part of your life before you achieve what's called core freedom. And there's an American professor at the university who's written a lengthy dissertation on core freedom. And people can look it up, core freedom, but we don't get core freedom until we get to a certain age in life. That's all. And then I had to understand, I was top of the class in physics, so I like physics. And when I saw this business about after the flood, God put a bow in the sky so that people could see they would never go and destroy the world again. And I thought to myself, that's nonsense. The rainbow is formed by water being refracted through droplets of light being refracted through droplets of water. So rainbows have been around for years, long before Noah. And then I discovered one of God's tricks, or methods, I shouldn't say tricks. He will say things which are patently silly to the average person to get a message across. And there's one of them. Anyone that understands physics knows that rainbows have been around long before Noah. Secondly, there never was a flood. The flood refers to the time in your life when your soul is cleansed, and then you live in the ark, or we live in the ark, and with all our family, and that's how we live a quiet life in the ark. The ark itself is supposed to be 450 feet long of timber. Well, timber loses its strength at 300 feet, so there's been people in America who built an ark, cost them millions of dollars. They went out to sea, got into a storm that fell to bits, and they all died. So, they're allegories, they're allegories, and you have to spend a lot of time praying, and you have to have a lot of inspiration, a lot of gifts to understand the allegories. How did the ark get across the ocean? They never had any sails. Daimler-Benz weren't born yet. Had to get up the Amazon River, which is a very strong river, 3,000 miles long. Had to get up 3,000 miles. Not possible. How did Noah understand 2 million creatures? And there's some suggestion there was 20 million creatures, but it doesn't matter, even 2. How would he know 2 million creatures to get? Not possible. So it's just not possible. If you use your common sense, you just see it's not possible. So that was all. That's all. I'm just pointing out to people. It turned me off when I first read it when I was 10. It turned me off. This is not right. It's probably turning people off today. That's why I wrote it. I said they're allegorical. Stories are allegorical. Understand them, and then you can get the benefit from them. But that's it. That's it.
I thought it was also interesting. It jumped out at me in the very beginning, in the introduction, when you were talking about that people don't really realize what they're doing. That the news is so filled with. Here in the U.S., gun violence is unbelievable. Children are shooting other children. People seem to shoot at people for no reason at all. And in the introduction, you talk about that people honestly don't recognize that they're really doing something that's bad or wrong because they don't understand themselves. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you're exactly right. People don't know how. Al Capone probably thought he was a good guy. He gave soup to the poor. Hitler used to like dogs. He used to pat his dog all the time. I don't see their evil, but that's it. No, you're quite right there. That's what it is. The only way you get insight is you must pray to be given insight. I think it's Paul the Apostle and one of the famous Greek philosophers, I forget which, says the unreflected life is not worth living unless you lie down at night and run through your mind what you did that day or where you can correct yourself and reflect on your life. Your life's not worth living because you're not making any advances. That's my take on the whole subject. People need to pray and reflect on their life. How can I improve myself? What have I done wrong? What did I do wrong today? What mistakes I make, because we make mistakes all day, and then just correct them. That's all.
How long did this take you to write? I know that you said that you would write for a while, and then you'd stop, and then you'd write for a while, and then you'd stop. How long altogether did it take you, John?
Probably it was over 12 years, but the last 6 months when I knew I was going to publish this, I spent 6 months looking up references on the net as to the Bible and put them in so that I had the latest information. Moses took the Israelites into the desert and they stayed there for 40 years. In Australia, we've got a desert that runs across the country. It's about 3,000 miles across, and you can't cross it. You go and try, you die. And these young kids, they're German Olympic athletes, they decided for some stupid reason they're going to drive across the centre of Australia. And they got halfway, got a quarter of the way into it, and their car bogged. So now they're complete, the phones didn't work, and they're completely in the bushes, no one around. So they decided they'd walk back to the nearest town, and it was a 24-hour walk. They never made it. They just dehydrated and died. And they were Olympic athletes. So to say that all the sick, the halt, and the lame were put in the desert for 40 years obviously is not correct. It means something else. Anyway, so you have to pray and be given understanding to understand the mysteries of the Bible. You've got to work at it. I've spent a lot of time working at it. I've spent a lot of time praying, a lot of time reading. I've read hundreds of books. I spent a lot of time studying psychology, communication, counselling, science, etc., etc. So there's a lot of work goes to produce that book. That's all. And so if people don't have the time, they can read it. And so I'm saying, well, you should be looking at this, as I just said then. You should be looking at these things. So that's all.
This is a book that you have to think about. When you sit down and you start to read it, your style is very inviting, and it makes perfect sense as you read along, and you fall right into it. And then all of a sudden you find yourself sitting back and thinking about what you've just read. Is that what you intend for the listeners or the readers?
Yeah. In law, if you have a legal proposition, you've got to quote authorities, The first thing a judge says, Mr. Jones, do you have any authority for this proposition you're proposing to the court? And if you look through the book, I've tried to put the authorities in the footnote of everything, every thought that I've said, the place where the people can go and look and find them, go and read them for themselves. Don't have to take my word for it. Go and look yourself. See what you think. But that's why all the footnotes there. I could leave all them out, but then it'd just be people saying, "Well, who's John Wheeler? What's his opinion? Does he know what he's talking about?" But then you can go and look at the footnotes, and they're all saints or Bible quotes or whatever, and people can work it out for themselves. Don't have to accept what I say.
There's one chapter called Working in the Garden. Is that metaphorical or is that literal?
God calls this world a garden, and he wants us to work there. Personally, I find this a little strange. He wants people to work. He wants people to build his garden, to promote the place and do, make money and get things done. I find that fascinating. But then, if you think about it, then that's all people could do, He wants people to work. He wants people to do their best, to use their skills. You've given all different people all different skills. And I just find that fascinating. That's what he's interested in. That's probably a good thing for human beings to be able to do these things, and then they can learn along the way. That's all. That's all.
Did you have anybody in mind when you were writing the book? I mean, I know initially you had not planned to publish, but who do you think is the audience? Who should read the book? Who do you have in your head that should read the book?
There's two lots. There's people who want to find God, the people who want to become holy, right? There's all different methods of becoming holy, but that's one there. The Casillo method: piety, study, action. You got to understand that you're the son or daughter of God. Study, you have to read to put on the mind of God, and you have to read a lot of stuff. And then action, you got to work in the environment. I became a marriage counsellor, so did my wife, because we both come from broken homes, and the benefits that I got out of that personally are immeasurable. And there's a whole heap of other things I was involved in, but that's what it's all about. And the other thing is, I'm going to a meeting in a few months. The Vatican set up this council to bring Australia into the modern age. And they wrote to me and said, have you got any thoughts? And I sent them a copy of the book 2 years ago, and they haven't got back in touch with me, so I guess they're not too impressed. But because there's a lot of things I say in there tear up their sacred cows, and they probably don't want that because they've spent 2,000 years nurturing these sacred cows. But I'm going to the meeting. It's going to be up in Brisbane, which is a capital city. I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to insist that they listen. And then if they don't, I have nothing more to say to them. But if they keep going on with this nonsense that we've been going on with for years, and I go through pages and pages of it, the people don't want to listen. People don't want to listen to nonsense. They get this innate thing that tells them that's nonsense. In the same way as I discovered when I was 10, that the things are allegorical. Unless they understand those things, they can't understand. They just walk away. And the churches, I don't know about other churches, but the Catholic Church insists on these medieval interpretations, which just make no sense, and they won't change. You know, that's the second reason I wrote the book. I wrote for people who want to be holy. I've told them how to do it, and told them a way of how to do it. There's not a unique way. And the second thing is for the teachers in the church to read the thing and rip me to bits and see what they think. That's all. Actually, I tell you a strange thing. I was in New York back in the end 80s, and I went to a cathedral there in town. It was a beautiful old church, and it had a restoration project going on. And I'm sitting there at the church, and I said, "What do you want me to do, God?" And a voice come to me with a sign and said, "Rebuild my church." So I'm a property developer. I've built a lot of buildings. And I thought, I'll go and get some money, and I'll put the money into the cathedral restoration program. And I did that for years, trying to go and do deals. And then all of a sudden, the penny dropped. It's not rebuild the church itself, but rebuild the structure of the church, which is now becomes the basis of the book. And that's why that's a bit of a revelation to me. I spent a long time trying to do commercial deals to get money to give to the cathedral in New York so they could rebuild their cathedral. And that's not what God was telling me. It's been rebuild the church, People take notice of these things. And so the church can go on instead of going on with the things that don't work. And that's where they're at right now. They don't work.
This is a fascinating, provocative book, and I'm sure that our listeners are saying to themselves, where can I find it? So let's tell them. It's on Amazon. When you go to Amazon, here's the title of the book. Prayer is a Journey by John, John, Wheeler, Wheeler. When you go to Amazon and click on the book, it will come up. You'll see the moon rock on the cover. There's a nice excerpt that you can read from the book. You just have to click in the upper right-hand corner where it says Look Inside. Now, John, it's also available in some other places. Let's tell our listeners where else they can find your book.
I can go to Balboa Press. It's available there. And there's also a website, which is prayerisajourney.com. They can get the book there.
What else will they find on the website?
To be perfectly honest, I've never read the website. I've tried to get it to come up, and it won't come up.
Oh, so, I got it to come up. I got it to come up. Yep. I looked at it.
New website. Yeah, what happens with new websites I've found is sometimes they won't come up initially until after a few days, and then they come up. But then I lost the reference. I couldn't find it. I've got wads and wads of communications about the book, and I've been searching for yonks, and I just got it. I just found it the other day. So I'm gonna read it after speaking to you. I'm gonna go and have a look at it. But it's got the moon rock there, which you like is the rock that was discovered on the moon, which had lain in the one place for 4.5 billion years.
Where did you get that photograph?
Well, I got the photograph. I've got a photograph in my computer, which I'd got from NASA files. And then Balboa said to me, "That's copyright," and they went and found another one which wasn't copyright. So the one they've got there is not copyright, but the one I was going to use is copyright by NASA. So I probably could have gotten the strike, but it's only just a moon rock. It's just a question of a rock. You go and get one down the beach, put it there, and say this come from the moon. But that's what it's only to bring people's attention to the fact 4.5 billion years is a long time, and then 4.5 times 4.5 billion years is a long time, and then infinity is frightening. But if you want to take the risk on infinity, you're more brave than me, I'll tell you.
Well, I've looked at your website, And I think it's really nice. You'll like it. There's a little author page on the website. You can get the book on the website. There is information. There are all kinds of things there, so people should go and check it out because it's very well done. I'm sorry you haven't been able to get it come up, but I did. I'm glad that I went.
We'll do it now.
Now, John,
We'll do it now.
I always like, our time is almost up, and I always like for an author to have last words about their work because it's your work. When our listeners become readers and they pick up a copy of Prayer is a Journey and they sit down, now this is not a book in my mind that I'm going to just sit down and read cover to cover. This is a book in my mind that I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start to read. It will pull me in, and all of a sudden I will sit back and I will start to digest and think about what you wrote. What do you want me, as a reader, to take away from the book? What's your bottom line for me as a reader?
The important thing, Suzanne, is that it is God's will that you be holy. It's in the Bible, that exact statement's there. It's God's will that you be holy. To be holy, there's all that my methods there are how to be holy. And it's not just you just don't go and have a cup of coffee and say, today I'm going to be holy. You have to work at it. You have to pray, you have to study, you have to work in the environment, and they're all the things. And it's meant to be a thought-provoking book. It's meant for people to read, to study, if you like, and acquire the knowledge. You know, I've read many hundreds of books, so it's not just this book. But I'm just trying to give people the method of doing it, you know. And you know, if God wants you to be holy, then why the hell would we not be holy? You know, God's got all these benefits for you. You've got so much. This other book I've written, you can't believe. When I'm writing the book, I'm putting it together now. The things that God's done for me are just unbelievable. You couldn't believe. The title of my other book is "You Wouldn't Believe It." You wouldn't believe what God's done for me, and He'll do the same for you. That's what I'm about. I'm a teacher. You know, people should be seeking to go towards God, to become holy, and you will have a life like you wouldn't believe. That's all. That's why I wrote the book.
John, I'm so glad you did, and I'm so glad that you and I had an opportunity to talk. Thank you so very much for being my guest today on Books on Air. It's been such a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, Susan.
Now remember,
Bye-bye.
You can find Prayer is a Journey by John Wheeler on Amazon and go to his website. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I hope that you'll join me for the next Books on Air podcast because you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so very much for listening.